Well, Matt, as if the FBI vetting the National Guard wasn't evidence enough, let me give you a sense of the level of jitters here. Earlier today, a major incident was declared after smoke was seen about a mile from here. The capital went into immediate lockdown. Police sirens could be heard all around. In the end, it just turned out to be a small fire in an area where homeless people are thought to live. But you can imagine the fear of those who were gathered for the first inaugural rehearsal in the Capitol there behind me, who were immediately locked down inside the rotunda. You know, Matt, America is a place that prides itself on the peaceful transition of power. But thanks to President Donald Trump, what we're seeing right now is anything but.
This American carnage stops right here and stops right now.
It's the most memorable line from Donald Trump's inaugural address in 2016. 4 bitter and divisive years later, and carnage is exactly what he's succeeded in leaving behind.
We will make America proud again. We will make America safe again.
Then the newly anointed president spoke, surrounded by all the pageantry of a US inauguration. Now it's thousands of armed troops in camouflage, not ordinary Americans, who are lining Washington's famous mall as the nation's capital remains on unprecedented high alert. And so great is the fear of an insider attack that even they, all 25,000 National Guard soldiers, are being vetted by the FBI. The concern is that pro-Trump protesters like the horn-blowing QAnon conspiracy theorist
glad to see you guys
may have military ties. He himself, now arrested, is a former member of the US Navy.
counting electoral votes of the state of Arizona.
And as this newly released footage shows inside the Senate chamber on the day, there's more evidence of the casual way police dealt with the invaders.
Okay, just want to let you guys know, this is like the sacredest place.
Allowing them to sit in the vice president's chair, pose for photographs, and even leave this threatening note.
It's only a matter of time. Justice is coming.
Words directed at Mike Pence, who'd been sitting there presiding over the certification of Joe Biden as president before he was quickly ushered away by the Secret Service as the mob descended. Unlike his boss, Pence and his wife tried at least to stick to some rituals, paying a final visit yesterday to troops at Fort Drum in New York.
You know, it is such an honor to be with you. Here I go, for our very last trip.
An acknowledgement, at least, that they're departing. But Donald Trump, caged inside the White House, hasn't been seen in days, despite his pledge to work towards a smooth transfer of power. And nor will he attend the inauguration, the first sitting president not to do so in more than 150 years. It couldn't be further from the unity that the man in the black cap and sunglasses preaches. President-elect Joe Biden chose to volunteer packing food boxes on the anniversary of the birth of Martin Luther King today. Another day, typically of celebration in Washington, D.C. Instead, the streets are deserted amid a massive, tight lockdown. But the lockdown will end for Donald Trump on Wednesday morning, when he will leave the White House for the last time as he heads to supposed retirement in Florida, leaving his American carnage behind.
Siobhan Kennedy. And outgoing President Donald Trump is reportedly working on his list of pardons in the White House somewhere behind me there. It's what every president does, by the way, in their final days. But I leave you now with a sobering thought. Now, when asked in a poll what they regarded as the biggest threat to the American way of life, 55% of respondents said other Americans. Back to John.
Matt Fry, we'll be hearing from you soon again. Well, the new incoming president in the White House, that's also going to mean a new US ambassador here in the United Kingdom. Like Donald Trump, the man who's been in charge of the embassy for the past 3 years has proved to be a controversial figure.
How do you like my hat?
Brash, bold and a billionaire. On paper, Woody Johnson is exactly the type of person Donald Trump likes to surround himself with, so it was no real surprise when he was nominated to be the American ambassador to Britain in 2017. Seen in this behind-the-scenes Channel 4 documentary, Johnson spoke of his delight with the opportunity to strengthen UK-US ties.
He coined the expression special relationship, and he'll be looking down on all of us and judging whether we're doing a good job.
And the ambassador's affection for Trump, who he welcomed off the plane on the president's state visit to the United Kingdom, seemed mutual.
Our two little boys, we're raising them just like Donald Trump. Not the hair.
But like Trump's presidency, Johnson's time in the embassy soon ran into issues. He was accused of trying to intervene with the British government to steer the British Open golf tournament to Trump's Turnberry Resort in Scotland. And he also faced accusations of racist and sexist comments to staff in the embassy. In a tweet at the time, Johnson denied that he broke any rules or was guilty of making the alleged remarks. With Joe Biden set to be inaugurated as president on Wednesday, Johnson is vacating his post in London.
Well, now, the former Deputy Chief of Mission at the United States Embassy here, Louis Lukens, was dismissed by Ambassador Woody Johnson 2 years ago. Mr. Lukens was accused of a lack of loyalty to Donald Trump. How? By praising President Obama's diplomatic skills. Well, I spoke to the former Deputy Ambassador earlier, and I began by asking about morale at the embassy here in London.
Yeah, I think it's been a very tough couple of years at the embassy, and I think Woody Johnson has not been the kind of leader that you would want running such an important mission. And you take someone who has no experience in government or diplomacy, who owns a football team, that's really his only work experience, and put him in this incredibly important and strategic role. It's not a huge surprise that it hasn't been the most successful of ambassadorships.
At what point did you think, I've got a problem here?
Well, it became very clear early on to me that Ambassador Johnson didn't have a very full understanding of diplomacy. He also seemed to lack the intellectual curiosity to want to learn about these issues.
This is extraordinary because, of course, this was a time when the special relationship might mean more than anything since war, because we were about to leave the European Union and look for a trade deal with America. Was that something he was across?
So again, the talking points were boiled down to the most simple points. US-UK trade is good, Brexit is good, the EU is bad, and that sort of became the mantra that the ambassador would repeat over and over and over again, which came again from the president. Those were very much the president's talking points, embraced by his ambassador.
To what extent did the embassy also become something of a Trump fiefdom?
The ambassador would say to me sometimes, we should have more conservatives in the embassy. We need more conservative people working in the embassy. And I would explain to him, there certainly are conservatives and liberals in the embassy. I couldn't tell you any of my colleagues, whether they voted for Democrats or for Republicans. We focus on the mission and we're not involved in the politics. And I think the ambassador had a hard time understanding that we were apolitical public servants.
He was not apolitical, that was obvious, but he seemed also to have an interest in Mr. Trump's interests. I mean, it seems, for example, although lots of people deny it, that the president really did want Britain to move the staging of the golf tournament in Scotland to Mr. Trump's golf course, Turnberry.
Well, look, I mean, first of all, that absolutely did happen. There's no question about that. Some people have denied it, but it did happen. The ambassador returned immediately from Washington and said to me, who would I talk to? The president wants me to do this. I said, you shouldn't talk to anybody. You shouldn't do it. It's inappropriate use of the public office for the president's private gain. And then a couple weeks later, he did it.
How has it left the special relationship, if it was still in existence when you joined?
And I think people, certainly in the British government, I believe, understand that President Trump was a bit of an aberration and that we will soon be going back to a more traditional relationship between our countries where we actually work together on issues as opposed to working at cross purposes. So I think, this will be looked back on at a time that was very difficult for the special relationship, but hopefully will end up being just a short blip in time.
What effect do you think Trump has had on diplomacy?
Well, the State Department has been decimated between President Trump's approach and then, two pretty terrible secretaries of state, Rex Tillerson and then Mike Pompeo, who's been a disaster for the State Department. Morale is at an all-time low. I think it's been a really tough time for diplomacy.
What about the state of the embassy inside in the aftermath of Woody Johnson and Trump?
Well, I think it'll, first of all, I think there will be a big sigh of relief on Wednesday when President Trump is no longer the president and Ambassador Johnson flies home. And I think that'll be a good time for the embassy to sort of decompress and regroup and then get ready for a new ambassador.
What was your worst personal moment?
I think my worst personal moment was I was up at University of Birmingham, and I gave a speech, and I told a story about when I was ambassador in Senegal and President Obama visited, and he had a disagreement with the president of Senegal, and how I talked about how they handled that disagreement, just making a general point about diplomacy. And the ambassador had just seen a copy of my speech, and he called people from the embassy up to his office, and he said that I was a traitor and that I was treasonous to the U.S. government because I mentioned President Obama in a speech. And I thought, I've given 30 years of my life with great pleasure. I mean, it's been an honor to serve. And then at the very end, to be called a traitor by somebody who has no government experience and who just happens to be a friend of the president's was, insulting and disappointing. I would say that was probably about the low point for me.
Well, Lewis Lukens, I'm very grateful to you for talking to us.
Well, thank you for having me on.
Lewis Lukens, the former Deputy Ambassador to London. Well, we did ask Ambassador Woody Johnson for an interview, but he's not doing interviews.